All right, ready to dive deep into some fascinating health insights.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Today, we're taking a close look at a podcast called Health Tips for a Better You, unearthing those hidden gems that can truly make a difference.
I love that. Like little cheat codes for better health.
Exactly. We're talking hydration, nutrition, exercise, sleep, mental health, the whole shebang.
Sounds like a recipe for a healthier, happier us.
Couldn't agree more. And one thing that really jumped out at me right off the bat was this stat. 60% of our bodies are made up of water.
Wow. It really highlights how crucial hydration is.
Right. Like without water, we're essentially running on empty.
Absolutely. Water's involved in everything. Regulating body temperature, transporting nutrients, even getting rid of waste. It's like the lifeblood of our system.
Makes you think twice about reaching for that soda, huh?
For sure. When we're dehydrated, it's like our engine sputtering, struggling to perform at its best.
Totally. No wonder we feel sluggish and foggy-headed when we haven't had enough. So the podcast recommends the classic 8 glasses or 2 liters a day, but is that really the magic number for everyone?
It's a good starting point. But yeah, everyone's different, right? Activity level, climate, even diet can impact your needs.
So how do we know if we're hitting the mark?
Well, thirst is the obvious one, but also darker urine, fatigue, headaches, those can all be signs you need more H2O.
Makes sense. It's more about listening to your body than rigidly sticking to a number, I guess.
Exactly. Pay attention to those cues.
Got it. Oh, and the podcast also mentioned adding lemon or cucumber to water for flavor.
Oh, yeah. Little things like that can make a big difference in making healthy habits more enjoyable.
Absolutely. Any other tricks you found?
Berries, mint, ginger, all great options for infusing water. And don't forget foods like watermelon or cucumbers packed with electrolytes. Super hydrating.
Especially after a workout, right?
Definitely.
So it's not just about guzzling plain water. It's about making hydration a part of your everyday routine.
That's the key.
Okay, let's talk nutrition. The podcast had this catchy phrase, eat the rainbow, and before you think Skittles, we're talking fruits and veggies.
Exactly. And it's not just about making your plate look pretty.
Right, well, what's the science behind this?
Different colored produce has different phytonutrients. They're powerful plant compounds with a ton of health benefits.
So, like red foods, for example.
Like tomatoes or watermelon, packed with lycopene, an antioxidant linked to heart health.
Wow.
Orange and yellow, like carrots, sweet potatoes, those have beta-carotene, which turns into vitamin A in the body. Great for vision, immunity.
I'm seeing this rainbow connection now. And what about leafy greens?
Leafy greens, they're full of folate, vitamin K, all kinds of things that help your bones, your brain, you name it.
It's amazing how nature packs so much goodness into these vibrant colors.
It really is.
Are there any downsides to this eat the rainbow approach?
Not really. It encourages balance and variety, which is essential. The only thing is make sure you're not just focusing on fruits and forgetting protein and healthy fats.
Makes sense. It's about that symphony of nutrients on your plate. I have to admit, though, even though I know how important veggies are, I struggle sometimes to eat enough.
Oh, I hear you on that.
What are some strategies that have worked for you?
One thing that helps me is making veggies the star of the show, like building meals around them, hearty veggie stir fries, colorful salads.
I like that, putting them front and center.
Yeah. And another thing is sneaking them into dishes. Spinach and smoothies, grated zucchini and muffins. Dot gets the job done.
Sneaky, I like it. Speaking of sneaking in healthy stuff, the podcast also mentioned protein and healthy fats.
Right. Can't forget those. Protein helps your body build and repair tissues, while healthy fats are essential for hormone production, brain function, and even help you absorb certain vitamins.
So it's not just about loading up on veggies, it's about finding that balance.
Exactly. Think of it like building a well-rounded team for your body.
What are some of your go-to sources for protein and healthy fats?
For protein, I love lentils, beans, chickpeas, tofu, tempeh, nuts, and seeds. All plant-based and packed with nutrients. And for healthy fats, avocados, olive oil, nuts, and seeds again. Oh, and fatty fish like salmon, those are full of omega-3s, which are great for your heart and brain.
So mixing and matching is key here too.
Absolutely.
All right, I think we've officially conquered the eat your fruits and veggies portion of our deep dive. Next up, we're tackling exercise. It's a topic that can be a bit complicated.
I'm ready to break down those barriers. Exercise can be enjoyable, and it's accessible to everyone.
Love that attitude. The podcast really emphasized that exercise doesn't have to be all about those grueling gym sessions. What were some of the less conventional ways to get moving that they talked about?
Oh, they had some great ones. Walking more, taking the stairs, parking further away from your destination, even just pacing while you're on the phone.
I do that.
Right, it all adds up. And then they talked about stretching, Improves flexibility, reduces stress, and it can actually enhance athletic performance.
I never thought about it that way.
And then, of course, there's dancing. Fun, effective, and you can do it right in your living room.
Okay, now that's my kind of workout.
Yay!
It really speaks to the podcast's message of consistency over perfection.
Exactly. It's not about those intense workouts. It's about moving your body regularly, even if it's just for a few minutes at a time.
Totally. But let's be honest, some days even getting off the couch feels like a victory. Any tips for staying motivated, especially when that workout inspiration is running low?
You know, the biggest thing for me was finding activities I actually enjoy. It shouldn't feel like a chore. Think outside the box. Maybe it's hiking, swimming, rock climbing, or even just taking a walk in nature.
I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. They force themselves to do things they hate.
It happens. And another thing is setting realistic goals. Don't go from zero to hero overnight. Start small and gradually increase the intensity or direction.
It's like building a foundation, right?
Exactly. And don't forget to celebrate those small wins.
I love those many victories.
They keep you motivated and help you build momentum.
Okay, I'm feeling energized just talking about exercise. But before we get too carried away, let's transition to something that's often overlooked but equally important. Sleep. The podcast called it the unsung hero of health. What makes sleep so crucial for our well-being?
Sleep is like hitting the reset button on your body and mind. Cell regeneration, muscle repair, processing emotions, it all happens while you sleep. If you don't get enough, you're basically running on fumes.
Makes you realize how important those ZZs really are. The podcast recommended 7-9 hours a night, but they also talked about quality of sleep. What factors can affect how well we sleep?
Honestly, our modern lifestyle is probably the biggest culprit. Screens, artificial light, caffeine, those things disrupt our natural sleep-wake cycles.
Yeah, it's hard to escape, right?
Right, and then there's stress and anxiety. Those can wreak havoc on sleep. And then there are habits we might not even realize are messing with our sleep: eating late, exercising too close to bedtime.
It's like a puzzle, figuring out what's sabotaging our sleep. The podcast mentioned some classic tips: bedtime routine, avoiding screens before bed. What are some other sleep hacks you found helpful, especially for those of us who are always on the go?
One thing that's often overlooked is temperature. A cooler room, around 65 degrees, can actually help you sleep deeper.
Really? I always thought a warm room was more cozy.
It might feel cozy, but it can mess with your sleep cycles. And then there's darkness. Make sure your room is as dark as possible. Maybe even consider a sleep mask.
Block out all those distractions.
Exactly. Another thing is a relaxing bedtime ritual. You know, a warm bath, reading a book, listening to calming music. Something that signals to your body it's time to wind down.
Creating those sleep cues.
Ex-
I love that. It's about making sleep a priority, not an afterthought. Okay, I think we've covered the foundations of physical health, hydration, nutrition, exercise, sleep. But before we move on, let's touch on mental health. The podcast really emphasized a holistic approach, recognizing that our mental and emotional well-being are connected to our physical health.
Oh, absolutely. You can't have one without the other. It's all intertwined.
The podcast talked about self-care activities that nourish our mental and emotional well-being. What are some examples that resonate with you?
For me, self-care is all about those things that replenish your energy and bring you joy. Could be spending time in nature, listening to music, working on a hobby, anything that makes you feel good. It's about making time for yourself, even if it's just a few minutes each day.
It's about those little pockets of joy we weave into our lives.
Exactly.
The podcast also made a point of saying it's okay to seek professional help if you need it. There's no shame in getting support for your mental health.
Absolutely. Mental health is just as important as physical health. There shouldn't be any stigma attached to getting help.
Couldn't agree more. So we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive, from hydration and the power of eating the rainbow to finding joy in movement and prioritizing sleep and mental health.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. But there's more to come. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dive even deeper into these topics.
I can't wait. You know, going back to those health tips, one thing that stood out was how small changes can have a big impact. Like, you don't have to change everything overnight.
Totally. It makes it feel less daunting, right?
Exactly. And it makes me think about one of their key takeaways, this idea of bio-individuality. Basically, there's no one-size-fits-all approach to health.
That makes sense. We're all different.
Yeah. What works for one person might not work for another, and that's totally okay.
It's like we all have our own unique blueprint.
Right. The podcast really encouraged listeners to try things out, to figure out what works best for their own body. Like with nutrition, some people thrive on a plant-based diet, others feel better eating meat.
Right. It's about finding what makes you feel your best.
Exactly. And it's not just what we eat, but also when we eat. The podcast talked about intermittent fasting. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, it's been getting a lot of buzz lately.
It's basically cycling between periods of eating and not eating. Like, it's not about restricting what you eat, but when you eat.
Interesting. So what's the thought behind that?
Well, there's some research suggesting it could be good for weight management, blood sugar control, even brain health.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. It seems like nutrition is way more complex than just calories in, calories out.
It definitely is. It's about tuning in and finding what truly nourishes you.
I love that. Okay, and this bio-individuality thing applies to exercise too, right?
Absolutely. The podcast made a point of finding activities you actually enjoy. If you hate going to the gym, you're probably not going to stick with it.
So true.
The key is to find something that brings you joy and fits into your life. Dancing, swimming, hiking, even just playing with your kids.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be this rigid routine. It's about finding ways to move your body that feel good.
Right. And that shift in mindset can be so powerful.
Speaking of mindset, the podcast had some interesting thoughts on goal setting, like not just setting big goals, but breaking them down into smaller steps.
Oh, yeah. It's so easy to feel overwhelmed by huge goals, but when you break them down, they feel much more manageable, you know?
Yeah, totally. Like instead of saying, I'm going to run a marathon, you start with, I'm going to walk for 30 minutes today,
Exactly. It's all about those little wins that build up over time.
and celebrating those wins.
Absolutely. It helps you stay motivated and keeps you going.
Okay, we've talked about nutrition, exercise, goal setting. Let's shift back to sleep. The podcast talked a lot about creating a good sleep environment. Besides the usual tips like dimming the lights and avoiding screens, what else helps?
Temperature is a big one. Like we said before, a cooler room can really help you sleep better. They also suggested blackout curtains to keep things dark. And if noise is a problem, maybe try a white noise machine or earplugs.
Makes sense. Create that peaceful sleep sanctuary.
Right. They also talked about sleep hygiene, those habits and routines that affect your sleep.
Like having a consistent bedtime.
Yeah. Try to go to bed and wake up around the same time each day, even on weekends. It helps regulate your body's natural sleep cycle.
And what about those late night snacks?
Avoid caffeine and alcohol before bed. They can really mess with your sleep quality. And of course, a relaxing bedtime routine.
I love a good bedtime routine. It's like a signal to your brain that it's time to wind down. What does your routine look like?
I try to ditch the screens at least an hour before bed and focus on relaxing things. Reading, taking a bath, listening to music. And dimming the lights in the evening helps with melatonin production too.
Those are good tips. Okay, so we talked about bioindividuality, sleep hygiene, all kinds of great stuff.
It's been a good discussion.
It has. But we're not done yet.
There's still more to uncover.
Stick with us for part 3, where we'll bring it all together and give you some actionable steps to take on your own health journey.
It's all about empowering you to live your best life.
All right, so we've been on quite a health journey with this Health Tips for a Better You podcast, haven't we?
We have hydration, nutrition, exercise, sleep, managing stress, even the importance of social connection. We've covered it all.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. But the good news is you don't have to do everything perfectly.
That's a relief.
Right. This podcast, and hopefully our deep dive, is really about those little tweaks, those small changes that can make a big difference, like those little ripples that spread out and create a wave.
I love that analogy. It's so true. Sometimes the smallest things can have the biggest impact.
Exactly. And that brings us back to one of the key themes from the podcast, bioindividuality. We're all different, so what works for one person might not work for another.
It's like we have to become our own health detectives.
Exactly. You have to experiment, see what feels right for your body. It's really empowering, you get to take control of your health.
I like that. So speaking of taking control, the podcast also talked about setting goals, not just big, overwhelming ones, but breaking them down into smaller steps.
Yeah, that's a game changer. It's so much easier to stay motivated when you're not trying to climb a mountain all at once.
Right. Small steps, big results.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's distill all this wisdom into some actionable advice for our listeners. What are, say, 3 key takeaways they can put into practice today?
3 takeaways. Okay, first one, listen to your body. Pay attention to what it's telling you. Thirst, hunger, fatigue, stress. Those are all signals. Your body knows what it needs.
It's amazing how often we ignore those signals.
We do. We get caught up in our heads and forget to tune in. Okay, second takeaway, find joy of the journey. Being healthy shouldn't feel like a punishment.
It should be fun.
Exactly. Experiment with things you enjoy, whether it's food, movement, or anything else that nourishes you.
It's about making those choices from a place of self-love, not deprivation.
Right. And last but not least, progress over perfection. Don't get hung up on doing everything perfectly.